you walk into a store and you're not wearing a mask. And before you know it, a member of staff comes over to you. Out, they say, out. You're not wearing a mask. You have to. It's mandatory. And you attempt to explain why, but your protestations are swept aside and you find yourself outside on the street, wondering, can they just do that to you? Now, let's find out if they can, with the help of Martin Byrne, a barrister practicing in Irish law. And Martin, without offering us specific legal advice and accepting that you're just pointing out the generalities of the legislation and helping us to understand it, can they, Martin, do that kind of thing to you? Can they throw you out?
No, and actually if they do, they'd find themselves in hot water. But under the legislation, Fintan, all they can do, all the power that they have under this statutory instrument 296 of 2020 is the responsible person, and that's defined in the regulation, can take or shall take reasonable steps to engage with the customers and to advise them or to inform them of the requirements to wear a face covering whilst they're in their premises and to encourage that they do so. That's it.
If they do, actually, if a member of staff throws you out, have you got recourse? Is there some kind of recourse that you can take when they do that?
Yes, there is recourse, because in no likelihood it will depend on the circumstances of the situation, of course. But in general, if a person has a reasonable excuse and they're thrown out of the store, there's a potential that there could be a claim there for discrimination under equal status legislation.
Okay, well, let's just take a look at that legislation, and I'll throw up it on screen for our viewers. This is the Equal Status Act 2000, and we'll just take a look at that there. For the purpose of the Act, discrimination shall be taken to occur where, and it gives some examples. Well, for example, a person, it says there in section C, who's in a category of persons who share a common characteristic by reason of which discrimination may, by virtue of paragraph A, occur in respect of those persons. In other words, if we all look alike, let's say I'm a black person in a white town, and I'm therefore, it's pretty obvious I'm in a particular group and I can be identified. But what if I'm a person who doesn't wear a mask? I'm pretty identifiable as one of those non-mask wearers. Does that give me protection under the Equal Status Act?
Yes. Well, you could be, you could interpret that provision as, providing for discrimination against a particular class of people, such as people who are unable to wear masks, or some people who might be inclined not to wear a mask for different reasons. But yes, that provision suggests to me that there is potential for a claim on grounds of discrimination if you're just seen, regarded as being part of a particular class. So there are other provisions there as well, Fintan, that are very important and that persons can rely upon for discrimination on grounds of disability, for example. So if you do have a genuine complaint, or you feel that you have a genuine complaint, you can make a complaint, file a complaint with the Workplace Relations Commission. I see you've just put it up there on the screen there. So if you go onto that website, all of the details are there, and you can contact the Workplace Relations to get guidance on how to submit your complaint. Now, I always advise people, I should say this, I always advise people, especially if you want to preserve your relationship in a local community, that you do your best to resolve the complaint amicably and without resorting to any kind of legal process. But if that fails and you don't get satisfaction, then by all means, you're entitled to bring your complaint to the Workplace Relations Commission.
Yeah, well, it seems fairly straightforward then, and you don't actually need a legal counsel to bring that complaint, if you like. It's a slow process, but let's just take a look at the details of it there. It explains it here on the workplacerelations.ie website, the procedure. So there are two stages there, and the first one is to actually write to the service provider and see if you can sort it out with the store itself. That would be your first step then, Martin, yeah?
first step. That's right. It's a written notification, to call it, and you fill in a form called an ES1 form, and you send that to the service provider or the shop in question, or the premises in question. And you send, along with that, you would send an ES2 form, providing the owner of the business to provide you with a response. And if you don't get any satisfaction, or they fail to reply, then you proceed to file your complaint with the Workplace Relations Commission. Now, the timing of this is very important. If you want to file a complaint, you have to do it within, I believe it's 2 months. You need to check that on the website, but I believe you have 2 months to do this initial step in the process, and then a maximum of 6 months then to bring your complaint. That's from the date of the alleged act of discrimination to the submission of your complaint to the Workplace Relations. So it's important to keep an eye on time as well.
Yeah, well, it looks fairly straightforward, Martin. You know, I have the form here, which you can print out as a PDF from the workplacerelations.ie website. And as you see, it's fairly straightforward there. Fill in your name and address as a complainant, and the details of the store where this occurred and how you were treated unlawfully, which was discriminating against me, it would be in this case, and on the following grounds. And you see gender, family status, sexual orientation, disability. In this case, we would be ticking that.
Yes.
That would be your grounds. And then details of the complaint, which you can provide a few lines, but it does say there, continue on separate pages if needed, so that you can detail that more fully, almost like, well, I suppose a witness statement, or almost like an affidavit. You don't have to get it sworn, but you could write up a full witness statement. Would that be the manner?
You could set out the facts of what happened and how you were affected, how you feel that you were actually discriminated against. Now, remember, people need to remember, it must be genuine, that there must be a genuine act of discrimination. And so, you know, it could be potentially on grounds of for example, somebody who's got a medical exemption, or some sort of physical or mental impairment or disability, or you know, they simply can't wear the face covering. So that person, if they're discriminated against in a shop, so if they're excluded from the shop, or treated less favorably than other customers, then they have a potential claim for discrimination on the disability ground.
Right.
And they bring, yeah.
Well, I'm just
Sorry,
wondering if there was, you know, someone could ask you to leave politely, but then I've certainly heard from people who had experiences where it was anything but polite. In fact, they were a little bit in fear. They felt, you know, under threat, and they felt almost like a quarry being chased by hounds out of the store. I mean, does that produce aggravation, and is that a more serious level of complaint?
That would be a more serious level of complaint. In actual fact, there could be a number of potential causes of action there in situations like that, where I've encountered it in my practice in recent times, where people have actually been defamed in the shop, or they have been assaulted, you know, and that exposes the business to a potential claim in the courts. Now, I should say that the discrimination complaints must be brought in the Workplace Relations Commission. But if you've been assaulted or manhandled out of the premises by a security guard, or indeed any other employee or an agent of the business, that could be a potential claim for assault there as well. And if you're accosted, verbally accosted, you know, there's potential for an act, you know, claim for defamation there as well. I've encountered that in recent times too. So It's very important, you know.
Yeah, well, you know, I've certainly heard accounts from people that they've been subject to being harangued, if you like, with other people watching, which is, you know, you know, I've got a thick skin, I suppose, maybe I can take it, but that's a subjective thing. And some people could be quite distressed by being shamed in that manner. what kind of a claim would somebody be able to lodge? Up to what maximum in relation to that Equal Status Act? And would these issues of aggravation cause that award to be substantial rather than minimal?
Yes, well, if the claim was brought all together in the Workplace Relations Commission, the adjudicator in there who would be hearing the complaint and ruling on it would have the power to award the equivalent as a district court jurisdiction. And that means the maximum amount that could be awarded would be €15,000. So that's not to say that a person bringing a complaint would ever achieve that type of award, but the potential is there. So this has the potential for very serious repercussions for business. And since I have a business background myself, I spent over 20 years in business. I want to make sure if I was the director or manager of that particular business involved, that my staff would be properly and adequately trained so as to avoid exposing my business to such an outcome. So it's something that everybody should familiarize themselves with and ensure that they stay within the confines of the law.
To an extent, I would have to blame the government in one way and media who have reported on this, because there has been an impression conveyed to the general public that you must wear a mask, that there are big fines for not wearing them. And the exemptions are not really stressed. So there are an awful lot of people who, with the best will in the world, because they've been led to believe that all this stuff is mandatory and that only the most severely disabled are entitled to exemption, etc., that they're acting like foot soldiers on foot of bad information. And that's really down to the government communications and media communications on these matters that have failed to point out that we are still citizens of a free republic and that we do have civil rights, and that the Dáil, the will of the people, has in its wisdom granted exemptions to certain people, and we all have to respect that.
You're absolutely right there, Fintan, and you've raised some very important points. In my opinion, from my observation, there's been a serious lack of information provided in respect of this particular issue. And I think that needs to be addressed. There should be a proper public campaign, because businesses are exposed to claims, and people who have genuine, as it's defined in the regulation, reasonable excuse, where people have reasonable excuses for exempting them from the requirement to wear a face covering in the premises. Those people are suffering unnecessarily on foot of ignorance, for want of a better word. Well, I suppose it's ignorance of the law, because as is defined in the regulation, that the requirement to wear a face covering is provided by Regulation 4 of Statutory Instrument 296 of 2020. And I'll just quote it just for information purposes. A person shall not, without reasonable excuse, enter or remain in a relevant premises in a relevant geographical location without wearing a face covering. And so the reasonable excuse is defined in Regulation 5, Fintan, and it's very broad in scope. And it says, without prejudice to the generality of what constitutes a reasonable excuse for the purposes of Regulation 4, a person has reasonable excuse if, and it lists out a number of statutory defined reasonable excuses. And the first one there on the list is A, the person cannot put on, wear, or remove a face covering because of any physical or mental illness, impairment, or disability, or without severe distress. So that's just one reasonable excuse. So if a person has that disability, and disability is defined very broadly under equal status legislation, equality legislation. So if a person has that disability and they are discriminated against in a shop or in a premises, or somewhere providing goods or services, that person has a potential claim, a good argument for a claim, I would say, if they do have a genuine reasonable excuse, or they do have a genuine disability indeed. That person would have a good claim, or a good cause to complain, I should say, to the Workplace Relations Commission, where it would be adjudicated on by an adjudicator in there for free. So people don't have to go to the expense of hiring legal professionals to represent them. They may want to do that, but it's a choice. But that service is there, and it's for free, and it's for the public. And it would be, I think, empowering to people to know that they're able to stand up and protect themselves against certain individuals who would have a lack of respect for their fundamental rights.
Well, there you go. Fundamental rights is what it's all about, and making sure that hysteria and mob rule don't take over, and that we all stick to the law. But there is perhaps something we could just also cover, and thank you very much, Martin, for laying out those grounds and helping us to understand what our options are. But you and others have also, in the last few days, finalized your plans, and the Irish Council for Human Rights is now underway. Could you just in brief explain to us your role in the Irish Council for Human Rights and what it is the Council hopes to achieve?
Well, the Irish Council for Human Rights has just been established. Fellow barrister Tracy O'Mahony, it was her brainchild, and I think it's a wonderful idea, and will, please God, provide a wonderful service to the people of Ireland. Where, you know, it was incorporated this year, and it's a non-profit organization. It's non-governmental. It's completely independent, and you know, we're all of the view that there's never been a greater time or a greater need for an organization which seeks to defend natural rights of the natural rights that we have, and for the people of this country, given the erosion of our fundamental rights and freedoms, in particular in this year, 2020. The famous ex-Supreme Court Justice of the Supreme Court of the United Kingdom, Lord Jonathan Sumption, where Lord Sumption has stated quite vocally again and again over the last number of months that our fundamental rights and freedoms have been attacked and eroded like no other time in history. So it's really important that people stand up and protect those rights and seek to defend those rights.
It's fantastic news, Martin. I'm very encouraged. Of course, I think many people are familiar with Tracy O'Mahony. That's the barrister who put out those videos explaining all these statutory instruments to you. They were terrific. And it's great to hear that she and others, and who else is involved, Martin, besides yourself and Tracy?
Well, there's myself and Tracy. I should say Tracy should be commended for the wonderful work that she's done with those videos, and they're highly educational and helpful to people out there who need some assistance during these very challenging times for fundamental rights and freedoms. And of course, there's myself. On the board of advisors, there's Tracy herself, myself, there's Dr. Fiona Flanagan, Dr. Michael McConville, Dr. Pat Morrissey, and Dr. Edmund Shanahan, who's a fellow colleague barrister as well.
But of course, other rights like your right to bodily integrity, your right to enjoy your health and enjoy your freedom and enjoy your movement as you wish, your right to conduct a business, your right to go abroad, your right to leave the country. All of these rights have been abrogated in some way or threatened to be, either in Irish or other jurisdictions. And I hope that we'll be able to bring you more on all that as we go on. This is Fintan Dunn for informedconsent.ie, and I'll be back with that and more in future broadcasts. And I hope you will take the time to join me for that. But in the meantime, this has been Fintan Dunn reporting.